Hello and welcome back to Rue's Life. So it's June, the weather is really warming up, things are starting to grow. So I'm going to give you a plot and polytunnel tour. So by now you will have all seen inside the shed, but we'll start in the shed because it's become one of my super favourite places alongside the polytunnel. So it's all organised now. Everything in its little place, and it's a great place because it's so cool to come and hang out in between planting and sowing and growing and weeding. So let's go and look at the rest of the plot. So just outside the shed I've actually moved this table and chairs. It used to be on the other side of the polytunnel, but it was in an overgrown area and it wasn't getting used. We do plan to have some decking here at some point, or more patio slabs, so this will become a more permanent seating area. And I've just popped the lavender, which I've been threatening for years to put into the ground in its pot on the table, just because it looks pretty, but I do need to get that into the ground at some point. You can just see the squash frame there that you should have already seen if you watched the video, but I'll pop a link above. Obviously the squash aren't there yet because they're still in the polytunnel, and they are smaller than they would normally be at this time of the year just because of the funny start that we've had to the season. So let's go across and look at the other beds. So starting with bed 1, I've had to put some netting over the broad beans. Again, they are slower this year. They weren't actually slow because of the weather. I don't find that broad beans are particularly affected by the cooler weather. However, the pigeons had a really good go at them, so I've now covered them with netting and they are bouncing back, but they're smaller than they would normally be because of their pigeon attack. And the same for the peas. So you can see now I've actually put some netting around the peas as well, and I'll just zoom in. I don't know if you can see there, I will get a little bit closer, but the peas are starting to recover, more so this side than that side, but I have got more peas on the go, so it's all good. So let's get a bit closer to those for you. So you can see inside their netting, these ones are starting to recover, but these ones are not looking too great at all. But there is a bit of green on them, so you never know. And then moving down the bed, so here we've got some flowers, there's some Californian poppies, and there were some calendula. They're just not doing brilliantly. The Californian poppy are really coming. I can't believe calendula aren't doing well. This time last year I was picking calendula and putting it in vases. The self-seeded stuff and the stuff I've sown this year, it's so far behind. But, you know, it'll catch up in the end. My bean canes, as most of you who follow me will know, I did plant out my original batch of beans way too early, and a combination again of pigeons and the colder weather, and yeah, there's no beans. However, I will show you the ones in the polytunnel. They're doing really well, and when I finally plant them out I will net them. On to bed 2. The celery is doing really well across there in the corner. My this year's sowing of celery was doing really well. I'll take you across and show you. I planted it out, but again the blasted pigeons took all the tops off, so I've covered it with a soil sieve for now to see if I can get it to recover. If not, I'll just sow some more. And then those are the leek across there, and we've actually started to harvest those, and they're really tasty, and which is why I've sown some more. And then once those leek are up, there'll be a gap for something else before the leek seedlings are ready to transplant. The onions, which were not the best specimens of onions, are actually doing quite well now. And whereas I would normally put my onions and garlic in the autumn and overwinter them, these were planted in the spring. They were not the best specimen, as I say, they were what I could get hold of, and it was a mixed bag of red, white and yellow onion, but you know, they're looking okay. And then just to the left here, these are the banana shallots which my sister gave me. Again, they're looking okay. Then we've got this little alpine strawberry which is doing great. and is flowering, so I'm hoping to have some fruit from that. Then there's a little random self-seeded Californian poppy there. There are a few popping up actually. I had thought that because I'd put so much down on top of the beds over the winter, I'd put lots of layers of mulch. I can pop a link above to that, what I did with my beds over the winter. And I didn't think that the self-seeded ones were going to come, but a few of the real hardy ones have pushed their way up through all the layers, so that's great. And then finally in bed 2, this was where my garlic was, and if I just zoom in you can see, I think there's 1 or 2, maybe 3 remaining plants. They look absolutely awful, just not having any success with the garlic. And I'll be honest with you, last season's, although it grew and it looked how it should at this stage, when I harvested it, it was quite small and it didn't store particularly well. This is my 3rd season growing garlic and I'm not having a lot of luck, so any hints and tips would be gratefully received. Otherwise I think I'm going to give up. And then we'll move on to bed 3, which is the brassica bed. So we finally got the brassica tunnel up, and the beer traps in and the brassicas in. So let's just move around so you can see a little bit better. So we've got sprouts, cauliflower, kale and purple sprouting broccoli, and it's all actually looking quite good. Again, a little bit slower and smaller than I would have liked. Interestingly, the ones that I originally sowed, which the pigeons chomped, the majority of them were dead, but there were a few left, so I left them, and since we've put the netting on and I've given them a little feed, they are actually making an attempt at a comeback, so that's great. So let's move around. So we've done beds 1, 2 and 3. Bed 4 is where the squash are going to be, where I've put the frame up. This is going to be bed 5, but it's just being suppressed at the moment. But what I have done is moved the potato bags onto the end there, just so that they're off the grass, but they're doing really well. And then there's a pot there to the left which has got some raspberries in it because they haven't got a home yet. They were given to me by my sister. I have finally finished getting all these pathways weeded and topped up again with some fresh bark, and they're looking so much better. And I've actually put some boards on this side, which was where the worst of the weeds were, and some of them of course are coming through from the verge on the other side of the fence. So hopefully those boards, along with the bark, and of course it's all on weed suppressant matting, that should make a big difference. And then while we're out here and on this side, I will show you that celery which the pigeons chomped on. So as you can see, I've popped a soil sieve over the top just for now. I'll just zoom in, and it's trying to make a comeback. So we will see. Otherwise, as I say, I'll just re-sow. I'm finding that once things are really established, pigeons tend to leave them alone, but it's while they are little that they just aren't coping. My long-term plan, because we don't just have pigeons, we have partridge and pheasant as well, is to potentially, now obviously I can't grow peas under hoops. However, let me just zoom out and move the camera. I'm contemplating making arches and netting like this for more of my beds, and then the plants that don't grow too tall but are susceptible to being got at by the pigeons, I can grow them under netting. And then the long-term plan would be to build what I'd really like is, let's move around, another polytunnel structure, but instead of it being a polytunnel, to have the netting over it, and that would really help. You know, if it's going to be a constant problem, then we're going to have to think of a solution. So either a fruit cage type structure or another tunnel structure, but with netting over it, and that way, you know, everything would be safe from those pesky birdies. So let's move on. Here we've got the rhubarb. I've already been harvesting from it. There's a bit of slug damage on the leaves there, but the rhubarb itself is doing fine. It's really, really delicious. It was trying to bolt, but I've just pulled that middle bolting section out. And yeah, it's really coming into fruition this year. It was grown from seed, it's into its 3rd season, and this is the best it's been. Then up on the table there, I've still got my strawberries, which I just haven't gone into the ground, and some cranesbill that my sister gave to me. The compost heaps are an absolute disgrace. I have not been maintaining them properly, and that's something I'm going to address this season. I'm actually going to turn those over, get a lot of it out, and make some kind of a top for them. You know, with compost, it isn't just a case of chucking it in and leaving it. It does need a little bit of work, and there is a bit of an art to it, and I'm afraid I have just thrown things in. So there is some compost at the bottom of the one on the left hand side. I'm going to make a better effort, or I said I was going to make a better effort, and here I am still flinging things in. I am going to get some kind of a tub or a wheelbarrow that, instead of just chucking it straight onto the compost heap, when I'm weeding and I've got bigger things, I will put them into the tub or the wheelbarrow, and then when I have time after that, I will chop them into smaller bits before I put them on the compost, because I have been a bit naughty and lax, and I've just been throwing the larger things on, and of course they don't break down. So it's important with your compost to keep layering it. So a combination of your browns and your greens, so you can put your paper and your cardboard. I use chicken bedding, old hay that hasn't been eaten, but it's important to make lots of little layers and not have too much of one thing all in one hit. Grass clippings, and any of your weeds and bits and pieces. Watering it regularly, turning it periodically, and also having some kind of a cover on it as well if you've got things that you've put in there that may be likely to try and germinate and grow. So I need to tackle that at some point, but do you know what, it's rotting down and it's making space for more, so it's not the end of the world. And then across to the right, there's some rhubarb in a tub there that my sister gave to me, and then we've got the potato box beds. They need earthing up, but other than that they're doing fine. This section here that we always end up strimming has been strimmed, and if I move you around, the whole plot is just looking so much tidier, because we did spend pretty much a day here, Chris and I. He was brilliant, he just got on with the strimming for me, and I was doing the weeding and the paths, and everywhere's looking great. So let's hop inside the polytunnel. So again, things are a little slower this year in the poly, but they're coming. So let's go inside and have a look around. So I've got some peas here, my squash. They're much smaller than this time of year normally, but they're healthy and they're coming, so that's great. I've potted some of them on again into larger pots. I was kind of waiting. I did get a comment on one of my videos when I was potting on, quite rightly, that I was potting them on from small pots and then putting 2 and sometimes 3 into a larger pot, and it was simply because I was short on pots. So because normally I would have been getting things out, and because it was cold that wasn't happening. So it's all a bit of a cycle, isn't it? So now that I've got a few more pots, because some things have gone into beds, I have potted on, so everything's in its own individual pot. So that is the squash, and my varieties, I have got Yukiki Kiri, I've got scallop yellow bush, I've got butternut, and I've got some crown prince. So let's move along a little more. Sweet peas this year have been a disaster. Some have already been planted out, but they're tiny, and the sunflowers aren't doing particularly well either. As I say, the calendula isn't much good either, but you know, hopefully it'll come and it'll just be a later season this year. I've got some sweet corn. The first batch I lost to the pigeons, so I've sown some more. I've still got quite a lot of tomato seedlings, and that's predominantly because I've not been at work, and I would often give some away, and obviously I've not been seeing friends and family as much as we normally would, so I've got more left over, and I'm thinking of just popping some of those into one of the outside beds, because they are just not progressing now, because they need to get out of those pots. The beans are looking great. I love growing beans, and yeah, these are really coming on. There's only one plant that's not looking so great, but the rest are looking really good. Still got some geraniums at the back there, pelargonium cuttings that I took, which are looking okay-ish, but they could probably do with being put into beds or pots somewhere. And then I've got a bit of parsley which needs to go out, some more squash. Oh, I've done another sowing of basil, just because I like to have lots of it. And that is germinating. But my first lot I've moved, and I'll show you where I've moved it to. So I've got the leek here, which were just the spare ones that I just popped in here for now. So I've got the big leek outside that I'm already harvesting. These can then go out at some point, and then I've got the seeds that I've just sown. And then you can just see in that little pot there is some basil, which is starting to mature. Then down in the long bed, we've got the first lot of parsnips, which are kind of doing okay. They're not brilliant, but they're all right. I've done second sowing of parsnip because they didn't germinate. I've got my red Baron onion here, which are looking really good. Then I've got my rainbow chard, some spinach, some rocket, and then a selection of various salads dotted in and around those, and they're all doing okay. In the baskets all around the polytunnel, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 baskets in the tunnel, and they've all got flower mixes in them. Some of them have germinated and some of them haven't. I may chuck some more seeds in at some point. Then over in the corner there are my aubergine. They're so small at the moment, I haven't put any supports for them yet. And then I've got some carrots here, and I'll just move the camera. And they're in two kind of phases. We've got a more established couple of rows here, and then a younger row there. My cucumbers this year are absolutely pathetic. I didn't put them in a line like that. I had 5 plants, and I wouldn't normally put them so close together, but I'd started off with 5. I was going to do a swap around with my sister, but then we didn't manage to see each other, so I thought, well, blow it. So I put all 5 into this tub, and I'm quite glad that I did, because 2 of them just shriveled up and died. And you can see that the remaining 3 are not looking particularly marvellous. My cucumbers, normally I love growing cucumber, and by now they would normally be starting to climb up poles, but hey, let's give them a chance and see where they go. Courgettes are tiny. This time last year I had 4 massive courgette plants. This year these are the only 2 survivors, and they are quite small, but they are finally starting. They are looking like they're going to do. So as I say, I know I'm behind. I know a lot of people have struggled this year, but you know, that's part of growing, isn't it? It's all good fun, and there's no point losing sleep over what doesn't grow. Let's celebrate the things that do. Already this year, since after Christmas, since January, I have had a harvest of carrots. I've had 2 lots of potatoes. I've had lettuce, rhubarb, I can't think, oh, celery. So I have had some bits and bobs, and leek. So you know what, I'm doing okay. And then over in the far corner, let's move again. So here are my tomatoes and chilies, which again are pretty small, but they are coming. And just by moving these into their big tubs has made all the difference, and I have given everything a little seaweed feed as well. I know there's far too many chilies in that tub, but it was the only space I had, and I wanted to just get them in somewhere because they weren't doing in the little pot that they were in. The lemon, they are the jalapenos. The lemon chili in here, I think there's only 1 left, and I don't think it's going to do. But there we are, it's such is life. The mortgage lifter tomatoes, which are the ones in this pot here, are the ones that are looking the best. I've got mortgage lifter, San Marzano, and golden pear. And they're all looking okay, so I'm hoping to have a reasonable harvest. I don't grow too many simply because I love tomatoes, but raw. Chris doesn't like them raw, and that's one of the reasons I grow some beefsteak and some plum, because I can use those for cooking. I wasn't very successful at making sauces to put in jars, but what I'm better at is freezing. So I think that's the way forward for me, and we are thinking of investing in another second-hand freezer. Sorry, the varieties. I think I said golden pear. I've got golden sunrise, yellow pear, San Marzano, and mortgage lifter. They're the varieties I've got. I need to get better at storing food, so I've managed to successfully store some dried beans. The onions I've done well with. My garlic weren't particularly brilliant, but I need to get better at, not just picking and eating, but having things that we can save, so we're becoming more self-sufficient. And then in these two tubs, I've just got a couple of flower mixes. The one on the left is a fragrant mix, and the other one is just a pretty mix of oranges and yellows, I think. And it's just nice to have a pop of colour, isn't it? So I hope you've enjoyed my little tour of the plot. I'm really pleased, considering the start to the season, that things are starting to flourish now. And the pigeons and the slugs and all the other things, the strange weather, for me it's all part of the challenge of growing, and I actually quite enjoy, the process of, well, here's a problem, how can I fix it? And then if you get it right and you succeed, then it's an even better feeling than if things just went really straightforward. And I also wanted to share with you, because if you are struggling yourself this season, then it's not just you, it's happening to a lot of us. And if you're new to growing, don't give up, don't be disheartened. It's been a particularly tough season so far. But now we're getting the warmer weather and things are starting to return to some kind of normality, whatever that is. If you're new to growing, now's the time things should really start to flourish. So don't be afraid to start again, re-sow things, have another bash, or try something else. Thank you ever so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you all again soon.